At 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, power had nothing to do with money. It had everything to do with silence. The cabin lights inside the British Airways first-class section were dimmed to a soft amber glow, designed to mimic sunset and lull wealthy bodies into artificial calm. Outside the aircraft, rain hammered relentlessly against the aluminum fuselage at JFK, delaying departure and irritating passengers who believed time bent to their importance. Inside, the illusion of control reigned. Leather seats wide enough to sleep in. Crystal glasses. Cashmere blankets folded with surgical precision. This was where executives sat, where fortunes traveled, where the world's decisions were made between sips of champagne and polite smiles. Seat 1A was occupied by a man who did not fit the picture. Julian Sterling sat quietly, his posture relaxed, shoulders loose, legs crossed with unhurried ease. At 42, his face carried no vanity, no hunger, just composure, the kind earned after surviving enough storms to no longer fear rain. He wore a charcoal cashmere sweater, dark jeans, and worn leather shoes. No logo, no watch visible, no display of wealth. On his lap rested a dog-eared paperback copy of The Art of War, its spine cracked from use, pages annotated in pencil. Headphones covered his ears. To the untrained eye, Julian looked forgettable. That was intentional. Power that needs recognition is fragile. Real power prefers anonymity. The first disturbance came with heels. Sharp, impatient clicks echoed down the jet bridge as Victoria Caldwell boarded like a declaration of war. She didn't walk so much as announce herself, her presence preceded by perfume that clung to the air long after she passed. She was dressed in Chanel from neck to toe, tailored jacket, pencil skirt, oversized sunglasses despite the indoor lighting. A Louis Vuitton carry-on rolled behind her, bulging beyond regulation size. She stopped abruptly at the entrance to the first-class cabin. Her eyes swept the space like an inspection. Approval flickered briefly. Then irritation replaced it. The overhead bins were nearly full. "Excuse me," she snapped, snapping her fingers at the flight attendant as if calling a pet. "You, put this up." Sarah, the flight attendant, barely 25, smiled professionally. She had trained for moments like this. Or so she thought. "Of course, ma'am. Let me check for space." She lifted the bag, strained, and frowned slightly. "Ma'am, this bin is full. I'll find another." "Make it fit," Victoria hissed. "That bag costs more than your car. Don't damage it." Passengers behind her shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. Sarah swallowed and tried again. Victoria didn't wait. She shoved past, dragging the bag down the aisle until she reached her seat. 1K, directly across from 1A. Victoria stopped. She stared. Seat 1A was occupied. By him. Her eyes moved from Julian's sweater to his jeans to the book in his hands. Then narrowed. She checked her boarding pass. Checked the seat number. Looked again. Confusion turned to offense. Offense hardened into entitlement. She dropped her bag in the aisle, blocking everyone behind her. "Excuse me," she said loudly, tapping Julian on the shoulder. Julian slid one ear cup down. "Yes, I think there's been a mistake," Victoria said, voice syrupy with false politeness. "This is first class." Julian glanced at her boarding pass, then his own. "Seat 1A, he replied calmly. "That's me." Victoria laughed, a sharp, humorless sound meant to invite agreement. "Oh, please." She turned to the passengers behind her. "He says his seat is correct." No one laughed. The silence irritated her. "Economy is back there," she continued, pointing vaguely behind her. "Way back there." Julian blinked once. "I'm comfortable where I am." That was mistake number one. Victoria's lips curled. "Affirmative action has really reached the skies," she said loudly. "Unbelievable." The cabin froze. An older man in seat 2A lowered his newspaper slowly. A woman across the aisle stiffened. Sarah rushed forward. "Ma'am, please." "I know who belongs in first class," Victoria snapped. "My husband is Richard Caldwell, CFO of Oak Haven Logistics." We pay for these seats. She looked Julian up and down again. And you don't belong here. Julian's voice remained steady. Please sit down. You're blocking the aisle. That was mistake number 2. Don't tell me what to do, Victoria snapped. You make me uncomfortable. I don't want to sit across from him. She flagged Sarah. Check his ticket. Now. Sarah hesitated. Mr. Sterling is a frequent flyer. He's in his assigned seat. Sterling. Victoria scoffed. Sounds fake. She leaned closer, voice dropping into something cruel. Look at him. He's probably someone's bodyguard. Or a rapper who got lucky. Julian closed his book. Slowly. He placed it in the seat pocket. Put his headphones back on. Ignored her. To Victoria Caldwell, that was unforgivable. She grabbed the glass of red wine resting on her console. I said look at me when I'm talking to you, boy. And she threw it. The Cabernet shattered against Julian's chest, soaking the cashmere, splashing across his collar, dripping down onto the seat. The cabin gasped. Julian didn't move. For 10 seconds, time held its breath. Then he reached for the hot towel beside him. Calmly wiped his face. Pressed the call button. Sarah arrived, shaking. Oh my God. Sir. I'm so sorry. I'm calling the captain. She'll be removed. No, Julian said softly. The authority in his voice stopped everyone. No, he repeated. We're already delayed. I won't hold up the flight. But sir. Log the incident. I want it documented. No police. We leave on time. Victoria smirked, buckling in. See? He knows his place. Julian didn't respond. He just looked out the window as rain streaked down the glass. Some lessons take time. And time was something Julian Sterling could afford. Cruising altitude has a strange effect on human behavior. At 30,000 feet, gravity loosens its grip not just on the body, but on morality. People believe the rules soften up there. That consequences are delayed. That entitlement floats lighter than air. Victoria Caldwell believed that more than anyone. Once the wine glass left her hand, once the liquid stained Julian Sterling's chest, she felt a rush, not of fear, but triumph. The kind of satisfaction that comes from dominance unchecked. She sat back into her wide leather seat, adjusted her Chanel jacket, and buckled in with a smug tug. Order restored. Around her, the first-class cabin remained unnaturally quiet. No applause. No support. No whispered approval. Just the low hum of the engines and the soft chime of overhead compartments locking shut. Victoria noticed. She didn't care. People like her were used to silence. Silence meant compliance. Across the aisle, Julian Sterling finished wiping his hands. He folded the hot towel neatly and placed it on the tray table. His sweater was ruined, but his posture remained unchanged, upright, composed, deliberate. The kind of calm that unsettles predators. Sarah stood frozen beside him, eyes glistening, waiting for permission to act. Log it, Julian said quietly. Make sure the captain signs. Yes, sir, she whispered. Victoria rolled her eyes. Always paperwork with you people, she muttered loudly enough to be heard. Just sit down and behave. Julian did not respond. The engines roared louder as the aircraft finally began its taxi toward the runway. The delay had cost 45 minutes, and irritation rippled through the cabin like static. Victoria lifted her glass again, this time champagne. Another, please, she snapped at Sarah as she passed. Sarah hesitated. Julian glanced up. Please, he said gently, not to Victoria, but to Sarah. She's had enough. Victoria laughed. Did you hear that? She said to the woman behind her. He thinks he's in charge. The woman did not respond. Neither did Julian. The plane lifted into the air. As New York disappeared beneath clouds and rain, Victoria settled into her seat, victory assured. In her world, outcomes were immediate. She yelled. People complied. She punished. People learned. She never wondered what happened after. Julian Sterling, however, had spent his entire life thinking about after. 4 hours into the flight. By the time the seatbelt sign switched off, the cabin had resumed its illusion of luxury. Warm towels returned. Menus were presented. Whispered requests replaced public tension. Victoria reclined her seat and scanned the menu. "I'll start with the caviar," she said loudly. "Then the fillet. Medium rare. Make sure it's not overcooked like last time." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, voice carefully neutral. Julian changed quietly into the airline's gray pajama set. He folded his stained clothes with almost ceremonial care and sealed them in a provided bag. Not to complain. Not to preserve them. To remember. He opened his laptop. It was slim. Matte black. No logo. The screen lit up without sound. Victoria noticed. She leaned slightly toward the aisle, peering. "Of course," she scoffed. "A laptop. Probably pretending to work." Julian connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. A secure interface loaded instantly. No browser. No email. A system. Folders expanded like arteries. He typed one word into the search bar. Caldwell. A file appeared. Oak Haven Logistics. Pending acquisition. Julian clicked. Names populated the screen. CEO. CFO. Board members. And there it was. Richard Caldwell, Chief Financial Officer. Julian leaned back. Across the aisle, Victoria raised her glass again. "My husband is closing the biggest deal of his life tomorrow," she bragged to no one in particular. "London. $1 billion acquisition. Some private equity firm." She laughed. "They think they're buying us." "Please." Richard negotiated circles around them. Julian listened. Not because he needed information. Because confirmation is always satisfying. He opened a secure chat. "Julian, is the Oak Haven paperwork finalized?" "Sarah, London, not yet. Final signatures tomorrow, 2 p.m. "Julian, good. Prepare executive termination clauses." "Sarah, sir?" "Julian, zero tolerance. Reputational damage. Immediate enforcement." He closed the laptop. Victoria ordered another drink. And another. The longest 7 hours. The flight stretched. Time moved differently at altitude. Hours blurred into routine. Meals served. Trays cleared. Lights dimmed. Victoria drank. She laughed too loudly at a mediocre romantic comedy. She bragged. She complained. She slept. At one point, she snored. Julian did none of those things. He watched. He observed the crew, the subtle flinch when Victoria raised her voice, the forced smiles, the calculated distance. He noticed the way power warped behavior, how entitlement eroded dignity not just in victims, but in witnesses. He thought of another flight, another cabin, another humiliation. 20 years earlier. The rain had soaked through his shoes by the time Julian reached the glass doors. He had practiced his handshake all morning. One suit. Thrift store. Too big in the shoulders. Sleeves slightly too short. He stepped inside. The receptionist looked up. Victoria. Younger. Sharper. Already cruel. "Yes," she said without smiling. I'm here for an interview," Julian said. "Internship. With Mr. Caldwell." She looked him up and down, then laughed. "Deliveries go around back." "I'm not," Julian began. She waved her hand. "Please don't embarrass yourself." The security guard glanced over. Julian turned around, walked back into the rain. That was the day he learned something fundamental. Humiliation is fuel. Back at cruising altitude, Julian opened his eyes. Across the aisle, Victoria slept with her mouth open, face slack, stripped of makeup and pretense. She looked smaller that way. More human. Less powerful. He felt nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just inevitability. Descent into London. The cabin lights brightened. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into London Heathrow." Victoria jolted awake. She checked her phone. No signal. She frowned. "Finally," she muttered. "I have a car waiting." She stood abruptly, yanking her carry-on from the overhead bin, nearly hitting Julian again. "Out of my way," she snapped, pushing past him. Julian remained seated. He waited. The jet bridge connected. The door opened. Passengers began to disembark. Victoria rushed ahead. Julian rose calmly, adjusting his cuffs. "Thank you," he said to Sarah. "I'll follow up." The captain stepped out. "Mr. Sterling, security is waiting." "Let them wait," Julian replied. Terminal 5. Victoria stood near the gate, confused. Two British police officers approached. She pointed immediately. "There," she said sharply. "That man. He threatened me." Julian walked forward. The officers turned. Recognition crossed the senior officer's face instantly. He stepped past Victoria. "Mr. Sterling, welcome to London." Victoria's smile collapsed. "Do you wish to press charges?" the officer asked. Julian glanced at Victoria. "No," he said calmly. "She has somewhere important to be." He leaned closer. "Run along," he whispered. "You don't want to be late." Victoria's heart pounded. For the first time, certainty cracked. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the bill came due.
She didn't know it yet.
But the flight hadn't ended. It had only landed. Victoria Caldwell had never been afraid of airports. Airports meant for people like her. VIP lanes, priority boarding, lounges with frosted glass and silent nods of recognition. Airports were monuments to hierarchy, and Victoria believed she understood her place in that hierarchy better than anyone. That belief shattered somewhere between Gate B34 and the sliding doors of Terminal 5. She stood frozen, heels planted against polished stone, watching Julian Sterling disappear into a private corridor flanked by men who looked less like assistants and more like consequences. The police officer's respectful tone replayed in her head. "Mr. Sterling. Not sir. Not passenger. Not that man. Mr. Sterling." Her chest tightened. This wasn't how the world was supposed to work. She forced a laugh, sharp and brittle. "Whatever," she muttered. "Bluff." She turned on her heel and marched toward the exit, dragging her carry-on behind her, refusing to look back. If she stopped, if she thought, the doubt would bloom. And Victoria Caldwell did not survive by doubting herself. Outside, London greeted her with cold air and gray skies. A black Mercedes waited at the curb. Her driver opened the door. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said politely. She slid inside, heart still racing. "Canary Wharf," she snapped. "And drive faster than last time." The car pulled away. As the terminal faded behind her, Victoria took out her phone. No missed calls. No messages. She exhaled.
See?
Nothing happened. She leaned back, replaying the moment Julian had leaned in on the jet bridge, whispering, "Run along." The audacity. Who did he think he was? She typed a message to Richard. "Victoria. Terrible flight. Some psycho in first class harassed me. I'll explain when I get there. Don't worry, handled." She stared out the window as London blurred past, unaware that every mile carried her closer to the moment she could not escape. Canary Wharf, the illusion of control. Oak Haven Logistics headquarters rose from the ground like a monument to ambition. Steel, glass, confidence reflected back at itself. Victoria had always loved this building. It made her feel important. Today, it made her uneasy. She stepped into the lobby, heels clicking sharply, Chanel bags swinging from her arm. The security guard at the front desk glanced up, hesitated, then smiled nervously. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said. "Good afternoon." "Where's my husband?" she demanded. "In a board meeting," he replied. 45th floor. "Of course he is," Victoria muttered. "Important men do important things." She marched toward the elevators. Behind the glass walls, junior employees stopped typing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes followed her. Something was wrong. She could feel it. 45 floors above reality. Inside the boardroom, Richard Caldwell paced. His Rolex felt heavier with every passing second. "They're late," he said again, voice tight. "Sterling Vance is never late." Mark Davis, Oak Haven CEO, checked his watch for the third time. "It's 5 minutes," Mark replied, forcing calm. "Traffic. Weather. Heathrow delays." Richard loosened his tie. "This deal closes today," he said, more to himself than to Mark. Everything depends on today. He thought of the new house, the accounts. The lifestyle stretched thin beneath appearances. Victoria had called earlier, flustered, complaining about a man on the plane. Richard had barely listened. He wished he had. The doors opened. 6 lawyers entered. No smiles. No small talk. They placed thick binders on the table in perfect alignment, as if rehearsed. Then Julian Sterling walked in. Silence slammed into the room. Richard didn't recognize him immediately. Mark did. "Mr. Sterling," Mark said, standing. "Welcome." Julian didn't shake his hand. He took the seat at the head of the table. The room rearranged itself around him, without permission. "Sit," Julian said. They did. The shift. Richard felt it before he understood it. The air changed. Julian didn't rush. Didn't smile. Didn't explain himself. He simply looked at them, at their faces, their posture, their fear. "Let's dispense with pleasantries," Julian said. "There's been a change." Mark blinked. A change. The terms. Richard frowned. The terms were finalized. "They were conditional," Julian replied. "Conditions evolve." Elena, Julian's lead counsel, slid a document across the table. Richard picked it up. His hands trembled. "This removes executive retention," he said, "and reduces valuation." "Correct. You can't." "I can." Richard slammed the paper down. "On what grounds?" Julian's eyes didn't leave his face. "Character." Richard scoffed. "My record." The doors burst open. High heels. Familiar outrage. "Richard." Victoria stormed into the room. And stopped. She saw him. The sweater was gone. The jeans were gone. The man from the plane now wore a suit that radiated authority. Her stomach dropped. "No," she whispered. Julian turned slowly. "Hello, Victoria." Recognition. The room collapsed inward. Richard stared at his wife. "Do you know him?" Victoria couldn't speak. Julian stood. "Your wife assaulted me on a flight this morning," he said calmly. "In front of witnesses." Richard's blood drained from his face. "She what?" "She poured wine on me," Julian continued, "because she believed I didn't belong." Victoria screamed. "He looked like nobody." Julian's voice sharpened. "That is the problem." He turned to Richard. "You bragged about your power. You enabled this behavior. You thought wealth insulated you." Richard fell into his chair. "Please," he whispered. "We can fix this." Julian nodded. "We can." Elena handed over one final document. "Termination." "With cause," Julian said. "No severance." Richard's breath hitched. "You can't take everything." Julian leaned in. "I'm not taking everything," he said quietly. "I'm correcting a debt. The past returns." Julian faced Victoria. "You don't remember me." She shook her head, sobbing. 20 years ago," Julian said, "you were a receptionist." Her eyes widened. "The internship." The room held its breath. "You sent me to the back door," Julian whispered. "You laughed." Victoria collapsed. "I didn't know," she cried. Julian straightened. "You never asked." Security entered. Richard was escorted out. Victoria screamed. And the empire cracked. Aftermath. Julian stood alone by the window. London stretched below. He had waited 20 years. And now, he felt nothing. Because power, real power, isn't revenge. It's choice. Power doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes. Slowly. Quietly. In ways that feel impossible until they are irreversible. Victoria Caldwell learned that lesson the hard way, standing barefoot on the cold marble floor of a building she once believed belonged to her. The lobby. Security escorted her out of the 45th floor, without ceremony. No shouting. No explanations. No negotiation. Just hands, not rough, but firm, guiding her toward the elevator. Employees stared. Not with envy. Not with fear. With recognition. This was what falling looked like. Victoria clutched her phone like a weapon. "Call Richard," she snapped at the guard. "He'll explain." The elevator doors closed. Silence descended. She pressed the button again. And again. No signal. By the time she reached the lobby, the reality had begun to seep in, not as panic, but as disbelief. This was a misunderstanding. Misunderstandings get fixed. She marched toward the front desk. "I need access upstairs," she said.
Now.
The receptionist didn't look up. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your access has been revoked." "What?" Victoria laughed. "That's impossible." "It was authorized." "By who?" The receptionist paused. "Mr. Sterling." The name landed like a blow. Victoria staggered backward. "No," she whispered. "He wouldn't." But he had. And worse, he would again. Richard Caldwell. Richard didn't cry when security walked him out. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. Men like Richard Caldwell had been trained not to. Instead, he smiled tightly, nodding as if this were a temporary inconvenience, a glitch in an otherwise perfect system. "I'll have my lawyer call," he said, adjusting his tie. "This will be sorted." No one answered. Outside, the city swallowed him whole. His phone buzzed. A notification. Bank alert. Account access restricted. Then another. Equity options terminated. Then another. Board access revoked. Richard stopped walking. The sidewalk didn't move with him. People passed by, indifferent. The world had not paused for his downfall. That terrified him more than anything else. Back inside the building, Julian Sterling watched none of this. He didn't need to. He sat back at the head of the boardroom table, fingers interlaced, as Elena summarized the next steps. "Executive restructuring will be announced by end of day," she said. "PR has a statement ready." "Read it," Julian said. Elena cleared her throat. "Sterling Vance has completed its acquisition of Oak Haven Logistics. Effective immediately, new leadership will be installed following conduct violations inconsistent with company values." Julian nodded. "Add one line," he said. "Zero tolerance for abuse of power." Elena typed. The board members shifted uneasily. One finally spoke. "Mr. Sterling, was all this necessary?" Julian turned. "Necessary." The word echoed. "Let me ask you something," Julian said calmly. "How many of you saw the warning signs?" No one answered. "How many of you laughed it off?" he continued. "Called it personality. Or stress." A man cleared his throat. Julian stood. "You didn't lose your jobs today," he said. "You lost your illusions." He walked out. The city outside. Victoria sat on the steps of the building, phone pressed to her ear. "Answer," she hissed. "Answer." Voicemail. Again. Again. She scrolled frantically. Credit card declined. Ride app rejected. Driver canceled. She stood abruptly, wobbling. "This isn't happening," she muttered. A passerby bumped into her. "Watch it," Victoria snapped automatically. The woman turned, looked at her, and kept walking. No apology. No fear. That was when it hit her. No one cared who she was anymore. Julian's past revisited. Julian didn't celebrate. He never had. Instead, he returned to his hotel suite overlooking the Thames and stood silently by the window. The city glittered below, unimpressed, eternal. 20 years ago, he had stood in a similar place. Not in London. In a cramped apartment with peeling paint and borrowed furniture. He remembered counting coins. Remembered skipping meals. Remembered the humiliation that sharpened him into something unrecognizable. He hadn't planned revenge. He had planned survival. Revenge was just a byproduct. His phone buzzed. Sarah, London. Media picked up the story. "They're asking about the flight incident." Julian replied. "No comment. Truth doesn't need amplification." The call that didn't save them. Victoria finally reached Richard. "Where are you?" she cried. "They threw me out." "Julian Sterling, he—" "I know," Richard said quietly. Something in his voice stopped her. "We need to talk," he continued. "Somewhere private." "There is no private," Victoria snapped. "Everything's gone." Richard closed his eyes. "That's the problem," he said. "We never noticed until now." She laughed hysterically. "This is your fault," she screamed. "You told me we were untouchable." Silence. I told you that so I could believe it, Richard replied. The line went dead. That night, the city moved on. News cycles spun. Another scandal. Another fallen executive. Another headline. But in a modest hotel room miles away, Victoria sat alone on the bed, staring at her phone. Notifications stacked. Friends disappeared. Invitations vanished. Silence grew teeth. She replayed the flight, the wine, the words she had used.
Boy.
Her stomach twisted. For the first time, shame arrived, not as guilt, but as understanding. She had never been powerful. She had just been loud. Elsewhere, Julian attended a quiet dinner. No press. No champagne. Just conversation. A junior analyst asked him softly, "Do you ever regret being ruthless?" Julian considered the question. "No," he said. "I regret that people confuse accountability with cruelty." The analyst nodded. The end of illusion. At dawn, Victoria stood in front of a mirror in a borrowed bathroom. No makeup. No designer clothes. Just a woman stripped of armor. She whispered to her reflection, "What do I do now?" The mirror offered no answer, because some questions are meant to linger. Meanwhile, Julian Sterling boarded another flight, another city, another deal. As he settled into his seat, a flight attendant smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Sterling." He nodded politely, and once again, disappeared into anonymity. Because true power never needs to announce itself. There is a moment after everything collapses when silence becomes unbearable. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses against your chest. The kind that asks questions you can't answer. Victoria Caldwell woke up to that silence. The hotel room was small. Too small. The curtains were thin, letting in a gray London morning that felt judgmental rather than warm. The bed creaked when she shifted. The air smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and old carpet. This was not her world. She sat up slowly, head throbbing, mouth dry. For a moment, just a moment, she forgot. Then memory rushed back in like a flood breaking a dam. The plane. The wine. The man in seat 1A. The boardroom. The look on Richard's face when the word terminated became real. Her phone lay on the bedside table. She picked it up. No new notifications. No messages. No missed calls. She scrolled anyway. Her contact list felt like a museum exhibit, names of people who no longer existed in her life. She tried one. Straight to voicemail. Another. Disconnected. A third. Unread. Unanswered. Victoria dropped the phone onto the bed. For the first time in decades, she had nowhere to be. And worse, no one waiting for her. Richard Caldwell, relearning gravity. Richard spent the night sitting in his car. He didn't drive. He didn't turn the radio on. He just sat, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the glow of the city reflected on the windshield. Every system he had trusted had failed him in a single afternoon. Contracts. Titles. Assumptions. He replayed the boardroom again and again. Julian Sterling's voice. Calm. Controlled. Devastating. Clause 14b. Richard had signed it without reading closely, because people like him didn't expect consequences to apply personally. By dawn, the car battery died. The symbolism was not lost on him. He stepped out onto the sidewalk, suit wrinkled, tie loosened, shoes scuffed. No driver. No assistant. No office to return to. Just gravity. The world responds. By midday, the story was everywhere. Not the flight incident. Not the wine. Not Victoria. That part stayed quiet. Instead, the headlines focused on the fall. Oak Haven CFO terminated in acquisition shakeup. Sterling Vance signals zero-tolerance culture shift. Boardroom purge sends message to executive class. Analysts praise the decisiveness. Shareholders applauded the clarity. Executives everywhere felt something unfamiliar tighten in their stomachs. Fear. Julian Sterling had changed the temperature of the room. And the room was global. Julian's morning. Julian woke early.
He always did.
Routine grounded him. It reminded him that power was a responsibility, not an identity. He went for a run along the Thames, breath steady, pace measured. The city moved around him. Tourists, commuters, construction workers starting their day. No one recognized him.
He liked it that way.
Back in his suite, he showered, dressed simply, and reviewed overnight reports. Oak Haven restructuring. On schedule. Interim leadership. Approved. Employee morale. Cautiously optimistic. One message caught his attention. Sarah, London. A junior employee from Oak Haven requested to email you personally. Said it's important. Julian paused. Then typed. Let them. The email. It arrived 10 minutes later. Mr. Sterling. I don't know if you'll read this. I'm an operations analyst at Oak Haven. Yesterday was terrifying. But it was also the first time I've seen someone in power draw a line and mean it. People like me have watched executives abuse staff, airlines, waiters, assistants, everyone beneath them for years. We were told to accept it, to endure it.
You didn't. Thank you. A.
Julian read it twice, then closed the laptop. That was enough. Victoria's reckoning. By afternoon, Victoria had nowhere left to hide. She checked out of the hotel using the last valid card she had. The clerk didn't recognize her. Didn't care. Outside, London moved on. She walked. No destination. Just movement. Every reflection in every window showed her something unfamiliar, a woman without armor. She remembered the young man at the reception desk 20 years ago. The look on his face. She had forgotten it immediately. Now she couldn't forget it at all. Her phone buzzed. One message. From an unknown number. You wanted to know what to do now. Her breath caught. Another message followed. Start by listening. No signature. She knew who it was. She typed back with trembling fingers.
What do you want from me?
The response came slowly. Deliberately. Nothing. That's the point. She stared at the screen. Tears came. Not dramatic, not loud. Quiet. Unstoppable. For the first time in her life, no one was telling her what she wanted to hear. Richard's call. That evening, Richard finally called Julian. Not from a private line. From a prepaid phone. Julian answered. Yes. Richard swallowed. I won't insult you by asking for my job back, he said.
Wise.
I just want to know, was it all planned? Julian considered. No, he replied honestly. Opportunity met truth. Silence. I failed, Richard said quietly. Yes, Julian agreed. But not yesterday. The line disconnected. Julian didn't block the number. He didn't need to. Months later, the world adjusted. It always does. Oak Haven logistics recovered under new leadership. Productivity improved. Turnover dropped. Anonymous internal surveys showed something unexpected.
Trust.
Sterling Vance quietly implemented similar clauses across all acquisitions. Executives noticed. Behavior changed. Not because people became better, but because consequences became real. Victoria, relearning humanity. Victoria took a job. A real one. No assistant. No authority. No titles. Customer service. The first time someone yelled at her, her instinct was to snap back. She didn't. She swallowed. Listened. Apologized. It hurt. But it also grounded her. Every shift stripped something false away. She didn't become a saint. She became aware. And awareness was painful, but permanent. Julian's last thought. On another flight, another city, Julian sat in a window seat, watching clouds pass beneath him. A flight attendant approached. Mr. Sterling, she said warmly. Welcome aboard. He smiled politely. Nothing more. As the plane climbed, Julian reflected, not on revenge, not on victory, on symmetry. The world hadn't bent for him. He had learned how to stand straight within it. And that, he knew, was the only kind of power worth having. Final words. Some people think power is loud. It isn't. Power is quiet, patient, watching. And when it moves, it doesn't shout. It corrects.